You are watching KUTV Primetime News with Mutegi K. Martin. Welcome back, and you can stream this live broadcast on your Facebook app through our Facebook page at KUTV Kenya. Now, agriculture is indeed the backbone of our economy. However, we are seeing weather patterns becoming more and more unpredictable. The big question becomes, how is climate change affecting agriculture? And what is man doing to ensure that food and other agricultural products are still being produced amid the changing weather patterns? We are now joined by Dr. Innocent Ngare, a director at Nature Point Environmental Services. He is a climate change and sustainable urban development consultant by profession. Karibu sana daktari, if you can hear me.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get straight to it. And the question I have for you is quite of a cliche question. What is climate change, and how has it continued to shift and, metamorphose or change through the years?
Basically, there is still a debate for the best definition for climate change. But normally, from different studies, it's basically the long-term change within the weather patterns, where we look at how human-induced activities, what we refer as anthropogenic, tend to affect the environment, for instance, the greenhouse gases. And also we have the other aspect of the natural variability, where the natural forcings tend to affect the climate, but tentatively, the Earth also is a system, tends to readjust itself.
All right. And then how is this change affecting agriculture? Because many have been out there saying that the climate change is really affecting agriculture, and we have seen it in different ways. How, according to you as an environmental professional, how has this climate change affected agriculture?
Basically, the different paradigms on how different scholars or scientists see it. There are basically areas in the world, for instance, with changes of climate, they are getting more agricultural produce. And also there are other spheres of the world with changes in climate. They're also having reduction of agricultural productivity. Some of the aspects, for instance, if we go back, we localize it in Kenya, how climate change is affecting agriculture. It's in terms of productivity. We're seeing a change of weather patterns, and we cannot predict the seasons. And what you need to realize is that basically the farmers in Kenya, so are the subsistence farmers, they depend on rain-fed agriculture. So the timing and the changes of precipitation patterns in this country is really affecting agriculture productivity because of shortage of water. And also, there are other things that also climate change proliferate in agriculture. For instance, the infestation of pests, and also we could say, for instance, other spread of diseases. So some of these things tend to actually affect the plants and tentatively the crops in within our agricultural setup. They could have stunt growth, and at the end of the day, the anticipated or expected yield at the end of the day or at the end of the harvest season, it is affected. And that one indirectly or directly affects the financial status or the socioeconomic of the farmers, for those who depend on agriculture for their own livelihood.
All right, and as we continue to focus on agriculture, which has been affected by various things, as you continue to put it, we have said time and again that agriculture is the backbone of our economy. I actually said it as I began the conversation as well. And as we look at agriculture as this backbone of the economy, how does it feature in the national GDP of our country?
Basically, going by the numbers or by the statistics, you realize that agriculture actually contributes about 30 to 35% of the national GDP. And also from that contribution, agriculture employs about 80% of the rural population and about 70% of the entire population in this country. And tentatively, agriculture exports. We do about 65% in Kenya. And from that, the country is able to leverage about 45% foreign income. So that means that agriculture is really the best of this country. And from those numbers and that percentage, can really tell you that we need to harness well and try to respond to climate shocks so that we don't see a lot of effect on our employment model within the country, on our imports or on our exports, such a kind of thing. So when you look at that, you could see that indeed within our GDP, agriculture is the backbone for this country.
All right, and you've mentioned climate change shocks, and every person who is directly involved in agriculture has faced this climate change shock and the unstable weather patterns. How can farmers adapt to these shocks and be able to remain productive as the days go by and, as we look for, bigger solutions in the long term?
When you try to talk to the farmers in this country, and as much as we talk about climate change issues, you realize that there is a lot of gap. For instance, as scholars, we do research, but have we localized that research? So tentatively for the farmers, what they need to do is, first of all, they need to actually depend or lean towards climate resilient crops. For instance, if you look in Africa, we have some stable crops that tentatively most of them are indigenous. We could be talking about cassava, we could be talking about millet, we could be talking about sorghum. If the farmers are able to embrace these crops, they are able to control the climate shocks. For instance, some of these indigenous crops are tolerant to drought, so that one could also give them a plus. And also there is a need also in this country for the farmers to be capacity built so that they're able to embrace climate smart agriculture techniques. For instance, the kind of varieties they grow, and also the kind of techniques they can come up with so that they're able to produce more. You realize that long time in different regions in this country, we used to have maybe 3 or 2 seasons for planting, and this one is changing because of the rainfall pattern and the drought. So what they need to do is that they need to come up with crops that can be grown within short time and they still can improve their social well-being, and also they are able to tap in towards adding to the country's gallery of food security.
All right, a couple of...
And also we also need to look at integrated pest management plans. So because as these pests are infesting, the farmers need to come up with approaches so that they're able to predict through the advice from the Kenya Met and the predictions, so that they're able to have proper timing when they're planting their crops, so that they're able to reduce to this climate shock. And also tentatively, irrigation is very important, and using organic fertilizers. At the end of the day, you realize that we have really been dependent on inorganic fertilizers that also affect the soil structure. And finally, the farmers need to adopt the agroforestry model, so that as much as the climate is changing, we must have a mix of trees and the crops so that we're able to screen off carbon emissions within our environment.
All right, and as the farmers continue to adapt to ways of farming better and making sure they produce more, do you think the government should also come in with interventions on matters climate change and maybe other stakeholders in the environmental sector? What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, basically we cannot leave out the government when it comes to the issues about climate change. This is where we're having the policies, the strategies. For instance, we're talking about the climate change plans that is supposed to be developed within the counties. The government also has to be at the focal point so that they're able to engage the farmers. For instance, capacity building and training, so that the farmers are also able to understand the issues about climate change through extension services. That is, it used to be there very predominant previously, but it's really changing currently. And also, the government should also give the farmers, for instance, subsidies, also funding, so that through that the farmers are able to have upcoming or new varieties that are being introduced to the market, so that they're able to climate resilient. And another thing the government needs to do is that it has to domicile the climate smart agriculture strategy, for instance, the Kenya ones from 2016 to 2017 to 2026. That is very important. For instance, it looks at major three aspects: increasing productivity, reducing carbon emissions, and building resilience in agriculture. This is something that the government also need to come up in. And also the kind of the existing policies, for instance, in agriculture need to be championed by the government, so that the farmers are able to tap into that, so that we're able to control the issues of climate change that's really affecting our agriculture.
All right, as we head to the close of this particular conversation, I asked this question knowing that you have tackled bits of the question, and I want us to put this into perspective and in a nutshell. Is there a symbiotic relationship between climate and agriculture? You know, most of the times when we address climate change, it seems to be the problem affecting agriculture. Does our agricultural practices affecting the weather and the environment at large as we know it?
Yeah, most definitely. Actually, agriculture and the climate are inseparable. They actually purely depend on each other. For instance, if I look from the agricultural aspect, is that we're having a good climate. The plants are also able to do well. But what is happening currently with the population that is increasing? And for instance, we're projecting the population to increase from 7.6 billion to at least 9 billion by 2050. It means that we're piling pressure to farmlands. So that means that the forests that exist, they're being cleared, they're being cut down. As we degrade our forests to have farmlands, it means that we are now reducing what you call the carbon sequestration, where the trees are major carbon sinks, so that they can control our environment. So, and also another aspect that from agriculture that is a contributor towards climate change is that where you have, for instance, rice fields, they are major emitters of methane, and also where you have livestock keeping, that one also produces a lot of methane. And the methane, however small percentage it has within the contribution of greenhouse gases, actually it contributes also, that tends to change the climate. And when we trigger the climate system, it means that we're going to have unpredictable weather patterns. And when we have these unpredictable weather patterns, tentatively we could have drought coming in, and when the drought is coming in, it's also affecting agriculture. So the only way we need to harness that is to have an holistic approach that at the end of the day, if you're a farmer and you're trying to do agriculture, you have to ensure that also you are doing it in a sustainable way, so that you don't affect the things that control our climate. So at the end of the day, it is going to be a give and take. That way, if the farmers are able to tap in the kind of that of knowledge that is a bit scientific, but it has to be localized in a very simplistic way, then we cannot separate climate and agriculture. They are symbiotic. So if you are overdo the other one, you affect the other one. So indeed, the two really depend on each other.
All right, let's borrow a bit from Mandera, a story we had from Mandera East Sub-County, and also a bit from Lamu, where now the Kenya Red Cross is taking food to the areas that are already drought-stricken. And we've talked about drought-resistant crops over and over. And the big question for me that comes in mind right now is how can the researchers, especially in the agricultural sector, come on board and invest in some of these areas? Because when I looked at a news piece today from Lamu area, where we have bony forest, some trees are still green in those particular areas. Do we have crops that can survive with hardly any water, yet be able to sustain people in terms of drought? And how can this be done properly to make sure that all the Kenyans are safeguarded from, losing their lives from famine and drought?
Yeah, I think if you look at the kind of research that has been done, different agricultural crops, they do well in different altitudes. So if you look at this semi-arid lands, as the climate is changing, actually the extreme is really intensifying and also causing more aridity. But that one doesn't mean the land is not productive. That's why when I started answering your questions earlier in this program, I mentioned about climate smart agriculture. The things we can do in these same arid areas, we need to do irrigation. Also, we can come up with greenhouse gases where we can produce a lot of horticultural crops that grow very fast within the short period of time. And actually, that way, we can be able to supply food within these areas. Let me challenge you that some of these semi-arid lands, the Asal in Kenya, are highly fertile. If at all we developed a model that is good, they can really impact feed Kenya as a country. It is really embarrassing that every year in and out that these semi-arid lands, we have to take food there to rescue lives, and yet we have research that has been done, we have skills, and we have people who are knowledgeable within over these issues, and we can be able to produce. If the environmentalists and climate scientists and even agronomists and people who have really ventured in agriculture can come up with a very adequate model, those areas can really produce a lot of food within our country and also the local people. And when you're mentioning about the trees that are green in Lamu, let me say that we have different tree species. There are tree species that are actually climate tolerant. They can go even still being green even the next 2 years. What happens is that it's how it responds, for instance, the kind of carbon levels within the atmosphere and how the heat or the temperatures affect its opening and the closing of the stomata. So some plants tend to avoid losing a lot of water when the dry spell is coming in, so that they're able to survive for a longer time.
Right. It's been a minute since I heard the word stomata right there. And as we conclude, the man has been blamed for creating the ecological imbalance that we have in the world today. And it has been widely said also that man has the key role in playing to make sure that the ecological balance is back to shape. In a nutshell, from a professional kind of view, what is man supposed to do, and what is man supposed to stop doing that man is doing to destroy the environment today?
If you look at one of the challenges that we're having today within our environment is population increase and the quest for farmland. And also we're having development. So all this is really piling pressure within the carrying capacity. So if man has to come up with a sustainable model, and some of these things have been actually indicated within our sustainable development goals, where we have the indicators. So for instance, if we talk for the case of Kenya, if you look at the things we're doing today, for instance, as urban sprawl is increasing, we are destroying our wetlands. For instance, you could see even here in Nairobi, whereby the areas that used to be wetlands are no longer wetlands, but are now becoming residential areas. The thing is that as the population is increasing, it doesn't mean that we have to clear more land so that we are able to accommodate people. For instance, the type of construction, we can change the model that a smaller space, but a higher accommodation of people. And also in terms of agriculture, we can use better technologies in a way that takes more space, doesn't degrade our environment, so that at the end of the day, we can live harmoniously with our environment. It is shocking that, for instance, if a project has to kick off, for instance, we must do environmental impact assessment. But at the end of the day, you realize that what environmentalists advocate there to be done, it ends that they are not being done. And you realize that one is really affecting our ecological setup. And if indeed we have to stick to principles environmental sustainability, they could really give us a guide. For instance, if you're talking about public trust, we need to be custodians of our environment, so that in that way you feel that the environment is you. If the environment is you, you are not willing to destroy it, because at the end of the day, we got this environment and we're here temporarily, and other future generation has to indeed find it how we got it. So that's why we talk about the sustainability approaches that are indeed important towards conservation of our environment today.
All right, Dr. Innocent Ngare, thank you so much for joining us tonight and giving us an insight on the effect of climate change on agriculture and the effect of agriculture and the practices of it to the climate as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that is Dr. Innocent Ngare, who is a climate change and sustainable urban development consultant. He's also director at Nature Point Environmental Services, explaining to us on how these two affect each other, that is climate change and agriculture. We take a short break. We'll be right back in just for a bit. Don't go anywhere.